and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nanette Nokan, and thank you for joining us. We are fortunate in our community that we have many colleges and universities. We also have a higher level of high school students entering college. But how do you afford to pay for college education? It's extremely expensive, and many people are in a quandary on how to finance it. Today we're fortunate to have a guest who is the Director of Financial Aid at the University of Rochester, Charles Pauls. Thank you for being here, Chad.
Thank you, Nanette.
You bring us a wealth of experience from Boston College to Indiana University, Dartmouth, small, large universities, and public and private. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Now help me walk through what parents and students go through when they apply for financial aid. Let's say I'm a high school senior right now and I want to enter college. What do I do for financial aid?
Probably one of the key things to keep in mind is that it's going to be different at every school.
Okay.
Some schools might have one form, some schools might have two, some have three. The key form is the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid.
Okay.
And students are going to need to fill that out no matter what school, because schools can't award federal aid without it. So it's the primary application form. The other very common form is the profile form, which is done by the College Scholarship Service. You see that form more at private institutions, higher cost institutions, institutions that are giving a lot of their own money to students. So those are the two primary common forms, and then every school may have their own individual form. Some institutional forms are 4 pages long, some are half a page just to get basic information.
Nice.
It just depends on how the school sets up their system, and the key that I tell families is to make sure you don't make any assumptions about what one school wants. For years I've encouraged families to actually get a folder for every college that they're applying to, one for each, and in each folder mark off what are the requirements for that school, and as they do it, keep a copyright in the folder, check it off, and that way they know they've done what they need to do for that particular institution.
So very important to get organized.
Yes.
Okay.
Organization is the key to the whole thing. It is a very paper-driven process. Maybe not paper-driven, more forms-driven, because so much is done on the web. The profile is a purely web-based form now. The FAFSA, over 90% of the forms are filled out on the web, so you won't necessarily be dealing with paper, but it's a very forms-driven process.
Got it. So if somebody's doing a search, just type in search engine financial aid, and those websites for the FAFSA and the profile will show up. It's one of the options.
Absolutely.
Now, in terms of timing, when does one begin to start to think about financing college for financial aid? I mean, does it happen during the senior year of the high school student? Senior
year is the best time. The time to think about it is before you've started to apply as opposed to after you've applied. Many students wait to hear whether they've been accepted before they start all the application process for aid, and that's often too late. They'll still be able to get through the process, but the deposit deadline that they need to decide if they're going to attend the school or not, the school might not be able to put together an aid package in time for them to make their decision if they wait for such a late date. So they should be looking at the whole financial aid process as they're looking at the whole admissions application process. It also depends on when they're looking to enroll. Some students use either the early decision or the early action programs, where they apply in the fall and they find out in December. And that's primarily when you know the school you want to go to. There's no question in your mind that that's where you want to go. Most students use the regular decision process, which is more in the spring, happening in the winter months and the spring months. So you need to check the deadlines based on which way you're going. Early decision are around November 15th. Regular decision are usually around February or March 1st. But definitely I would say for the majority of students, January is the month to be filling out all of your financial aid application materials.
And prior to that, the parents need to gather up and students need to gather some of their documents as well, probably.
Yes. The easiest thing is if you sit there with your taxes in front of you, because all of the forms, the FAFSA form, the profile form, they'll give you specific line references. If they ask for your adjusted gross income, they will say on the 1040 it's located on line X, on the 1040A it's located on line Y. So they will give you very specific information. So if you put all the taxes out in front of you, you should be able to work through the process with relative ease. It's not quick. Families who wait until 10 o'clock the night before everything is due are definitely going to run into challenges. But I've often told families, set aside a whole Saturday that you know you're going to do this, plan on not doing anything else, and most likely you'll be done by early afternoon and can go out and enjoy dinner and a movie. So
that's great. It's great advice. 19 years in the field, so that's wonderful. Thank you for all that. It's actually very practical to have that information available. So, should every child and parent think about applying for financial aid, and when does it become a fruitless exercise to complete the forms?
Well, part of it is looking at the types of aid an institution offers. Within financial aid, we talk about two major groups of aid. There's merit-based aid, which is really based on some attribute of the student, their artistic talent, their athletic talent, their academic talent. Community service has become a huge factor in recent years when looking at merit-based aid. There's also need-based aid, which is really looking at, can the family afford to pay for college? What we do is we analyze, that's what the FAFSA and the profile help us analyze, is whether or not the family's financial strength is strong enough to cover a year of education. And if it's not, then we try to offer need-based aid to help cover the portion that the family can't cover. When it comes to merit aid, I would say it's absolutely worth every student applying for that because it's really focused on their individual characteristics. And that is even more diverse based on the schools that you're applying to. Each school will really have its own way of a student applying for merit-based aid. For example, at University of Rochester, the student doesn't need to fill out any extra application materials. They just apply for admission, and their admissions application also serves as their merit-based application.
Oh, very nice.
When I went to school at the University of Delaware, it was the merit-based applications were separate forms. There was one form I filled out with like 8 different questions for a group of 20 scholarships. Then there was another application that I had to fill out for a different set of scholarships. So there could be a number. But definitely, you want to make sure that the institution knows what makes you unique, because those are the pieces upon which they would offer merit awards. When it comes to need-based financial aid, my advice, there is no cutoff point. I can't say a certain adjusted gross income or a certain asset level because there's so many factors. The size of the family, the number of students in college, the asset levels, the income levels, it all, even the state you live in, and the age of the older parent, they all have some kind of play in this calculation. But what I recommend is, if you think you're going to have difficulty covering the cost of education, apply for need-based financial aid, because then we can determine whether or not there's anything we can offer. One of the things, just the other day, I was meeting with the woman who oversees our publications, and we were talking about putting together financial aid materials to help make sure that students don't self-select out of the institution because they don't think they can afford it. Our whole goal is, if U of R is the school that you're interested in, and I think any school would say this, if this is the school that's right for you, apply and let us see what we can do to help make it financially feasible for you. Don't say no to a school because it costs $40,000 a year to go to. You might get $30,000 a year in financial aid.
Sure.
So.
Sure, that's what's really important to think about, the field you want to study, and if that is the school that's a good fit, and then the school might put a package together that would.
I definitely emphasize, look at what you're looking for in a school first. Don't look at the cost first.
Sure, well, that's smart. Yeah, then that way you don't have any regrets, just in case that school would have given you more money than they had intended. What about, grandparents who have a lot of great intentions to help their grandchildren go to college? They start, different accounts, 529 plans, uniform gift to minors accounts, and so on. How does that affect the financial aid process?
It can have a huge impact, and it's really key for family members, whether it's grandparents, aunts, uncles, even the parents, to think about how they are investing for the child's education. One of the things that quite often happens is people will put money in the student's name. They'll save money in the student's name. Parents often do it. There's tax consequences if you put it in the student's name as opposed to your own, or the Uniform Gift to Minors Act and other things like that. The challenge with the need-based formula is that of all the pieces of the calculation, student assets is the easiest. 35% of a student's assets are expected to go towards education, period. That's how the formula works. That's across the board. So if families save in the student's name, 35% of those are absolutely going to be expected to go towards education, regardless of what else might change or things like that.
I see. So take me that example. Let's say a grandparent gave $10,000 in account for the student. So, and the student was qualified for a $10,000 grant. So that means that the $3,500 of the $10,000 the student owns will count against what the student would have gotten. Right?
Effectively, that's how the general formula would work. We look at lots of factors, parents' income, the cost of education, things like that. But effectively, the amount a family would be expected to contribute increases as the student's assets increase, because 35% of those assets go towards education. You mentioned the 529 plans. The 529 plans are a wonderful opportunity because it provides a lot of flexibility. Within the 529 plans, the grandparent, the aunt, the uncle, anyone can be saving it with them in their own name. They're the owner of the account, but they choose a beneficiary. They can adjust the beneficiary based on different plans, or based on students having different plans. They might set up an account for one grandchild, but then that grandchild decides maybe to wait a year or two before they go to college. They could switch it to any of that grandchild's cousins and have a cousin be the beneficiary. So it opens up the flexibility. It also opens up the timing, etc. You can delay it, you can pull it out, you can get the money out. There's a penalty if it's not used, but if they put the money in, start it with the oldest grandchild, whatever's left over, they can move on to the next grandchild and move on to the next grandchild. So it really provides a level of flexibility for grandparents or other relatives that are interested in investing in the family as opposed to one particular child. The parents also, when they're thinking about investing, the way the formula works, once all the tables and the calculations go through, it's roughly about 4% of a parent's assets that are expected to go towards education. That's a lot different than 35% of a student's assets. So when it comes down to it, while you might save some money tax-wise over a few years, it might end up significantly affecting the financial aid package if you choose to put it in the student's name as opposed to putting it into the parent's name.
That's a good point. And also from a financial planning perspective, it pigeonholes that money for a particular purpose. If the student happened to get a lot of merit scholarships, the money would have been not used for the purpose of education if that was the intention.
Exactly.
Or rather unique, but it could happen in that manner. Yeah,
definitely could happen. So there's no, with students, it's the concept behind the way we do financial aid is that education is the student's primary focus.
Okay.
When they are going to school, it's not time to be saving for their first house, saving for retirement, those types of things. If they're saving money, it's for their education because that's something that's going to benefit them throughout their entire life. Whereas with parents, we realize there's all sorts of things that parents have to save for. So when we're looking at the parent assets, we actually protect a portion of them, saying there needs to be some for emergencies. You know, we realize we can't expect you to dip too far into your savings. We hope that you've saved for a college education, so we don't want to penalize you for that. So based on the age of your children, we're going to set aside another amount of money and say, okay, we're going to protect that as well. So the formula is really built around parents saving for their children's education.
I see. That's really practical perspective on that. You know, it's a great way to view how you save, because you're absolutely right. The parents do have some other financial goals, perhaps other children, or like I said, emergency funds, their own retirement, whereas the child's focus is building their future by having money available for college. And you're right, on the average, people with college degrees make more money than someone who has a high school diploma. So very good. That's terrific. So many students get part-time jobs when they attend college or during the summers, and in many cases they do that to have pocket money throughout the year. How does it affect them? Is there a disincentive for the students to go and get a job while they're at school?
It can sometimes wreak a little havoc with the formula, and as financial aid professionals, we try to make sure that students aren't disadvantaged by working towards their education. We do have to take it into account the same way with savings. We look at their income. The primary focus of any money that's left over after they work is to go towards their education. So it really is all about their education while they're in school. Excuse me. But we, as a profession, especially schools that are having large amounts of their own need-based scholarships, schools like the Ivy Leagues, University of Rochester, Stanford, many schools that have large endowments and are focused on making sure that students who can't afford to go to school still have the money. We expect students to work during the summer. We have a summer earnings expectation that's built into our formula. So actually, the way we put together a financial aid package, a student is going to run into difficulty if they don't go and find a job during the summer to help cover that expectation. So students should definitely look for summer employment. Even when a student's contribution goes up because they've worked, it isn't a dollar for dollar type thing.
I see.
Using parents as an example again, parents think, well, if I put money into a bank account, that's going to increase my contribution and reduce the amount of aid. That is true, but it's not a dollar for dollar type thing. You know, for $100 you put in, your total aid might go down $5. So you're absolutely at a benefit. When people talk about, well, I should just not work anymore and I'll get more aid. It's not a dollar for dollar thing. So even if you do get some more aid, it's not going to be nearly the amount that you've lost in income coming in. And that's true for students as well. If they do lose some aid, it's not the amount that they actually earned. They're still in a better position for having worked hard, saved hard, those types of things.
So it makes sense to try to find a summer job as opposed to laying around by the pool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, you know, sometimes, you know, many times life happens. You know, there's death, there's parents get laid off, there's disability. Let's say those things happen throughout the school year and the financial aid forms have already been completed. What kind of action does the student need to take? I mean, obviously, you know, the situation changes when there's all of a sudden the death of a parent. What should the student be doing if something like that occurred?
One of the things, for the past decade, I've been doing orientations at the various schools that I've worked at. When we bring in the new class, the parents are there and we talk to them about, here's what to expect. And the final thing I say in every one of these presentations is that even though we'll have you reapply every year for financial aid, don't hesitate to call us when something changes. Because we've put together a financial aid package based on the picture that we took. We took a snapshot of your assets. We took, you know, for this year we looked at their 2004 income. You know, so that's the information we're working with. If someone loses a job, if there's a death, if there's something that changes the financial strength, we encourage everyone to get on the phone and call us right away. So that way we can start talking through the process. it may not be that we change anything in the aid package right away, but it's at least, okay, we know what's going on, we can give some advice, we can talk about, is this more a matter of they need significant financial help? Maybe it's just a matter of they need to go from making one payment from the semester and we get them on the monthly payment program, so they spread it out from a big payment in August and a big payment in December to 10 payments across a 12-month period. Sometimes that's all people need, is an ability to change their cash flow.
Sure.
It's not really that they can't afford it, they just are running into cash problems. Other times, there's definite help that they need. So we want to talk to them as early as possible, let them know, okay, here's the things that we're going to know at given times. We kind of have a process, most schools have a process that if someone loses a job, we wait for about 10 weeks to go by, because if they're going to find employment in a way that it's not going to affect their income, that's going to happen in 10 weeks.
Yes.
If they find a job in 5 weeks, severance, unemployment, other things, by the end of the year, their income may not really have changed.
Sure. Okay.
Whereas if they've been out of work for over 10 weeks, most likely, even when they do find another job, there's going to have been an impact on their finances, so we want to look at that. So we try to give them all these details of, let's talk about this now, call us at this point, and we'll talk again, maybe right before the bill is due, and
Sure.
we'll work with the bursar to let them know, we're working on things, don't cut them off, we'll get this fixed. Then call us back again, but we'll work out a schedule to make sure we help them. We definitely encourage people, don't wait. Don't wait until the bill is 2 months overdue, and you've run out of every other option, and we're the last person you call.
Sure.
We should be the first person you call if you're not sure that you're going to be able to pay for the education.
I see. So if there's a circumstance that happens, rather than panicking saying, I can't afford to go to school anymore, really the right thing to do is contact the financial aid office and say, here, my circumstances have changed, here's how it looks like, and then perhaps some other arrangements can be made. So don't give up.
That is absolutely true.
Now, 25 years ago, I'm dating myself. Anyway, when I went to college, some of my classmates had applied for financial independence so they could get more financial aid.
Yeah.
Does that still work?
When I first started in the field, there was a rule that if you hadn't been claimed by your parents for at least 2 years, and in those 2 years you had earned at least $4,000, you were considered independent. I always thought it was an odd rule because $4,000 isn't really quite enough to support a student living on their own. I think in my first year in the field, they reauthorized the Higher Education Act, which is what governs all of these policies, and they removed that rule. So it's no longer a matter of who's being claimed on the taxes. It looks at some very specific components, things like, are you married? Do you have children of your own? Are you an orphan? Things like that. So most traditional age students, 18 to 22-year-olds that are enrolled in college, are going to be considered dependent when it comes to financial aid. Older students in their late 20s and their 30s are considered independent by age, if nothing else. 24 is the age you become independent, or by other circumstances. They've started a life, they've married, they've had children, they're going on to graduate school, things like that. But there is no longer the ability to say, I'm not on mom's taxes, so you don't need to look at her money anymore. We look at mom and dad, because really the focus of the entire program, what's been said for years, what was taught to me, what I've said in all the presentations I do, is that it's the responsibility of the family to finance higher education to the extent that they are able. And that's what our role is to figure out what is that extent. If that extent is only $500, then that's what we figure out. If that extent is $25,000, then that's what we figure out. But really, that's where the focus is that the family is the first place that we look to contribute towards a child's education.
I see. But when I was going to college, I applied to 2 schools, and the school I attended, which was Cornell, gave me $50 more in financial aid, so I chose it over the other school. But I was so desperate. My mom had 5 children to educate. It's like, wow, the $50 made a huge difference. So now, what are the common misconceptions that people have about financial aid? I mean, what are the things that, don't think that way, because that's not so true?
Well, I mentioned one of them earlier, is that if you save, it's going to hurt you. And that, I think, above and beyond everything, is the most common misperception. People think that they are going to be penalized for saving. You will always be in a stronger position if you have saved money. It gives you more options. You could still choose to finance things and leave the savings for other things. Whereas if you don't have any money put away, if there's not enough by way of aid coming in your opinion, to cover the cost, you don't have other options to turn to. Sure. So I think that's the number one misconception. The second misconception is the complication factor. We actually talked about this recently. The College Board, which is the group that oversees the CSS profile form, recently pulled together a number of directors of financial aid from institutions that use the profile to talk about how it's complicated, how could we make it easier, things like that. And one of the things we mentioned at one point in this focus group was part of it is just changing the perception, because people think it's so much harder than it is. Parents tell another parent, that was the hardest form I've ever filled out in my entire life.
And they'll panic.
Exactly. But truly, if you sit down with the form, and even the online forms have a printable worksheet, so you can print out a worksheet, you sit down with your taxes, your bank statements, and this worksheet, and they will give you very solid line-by-line references to go through and do it. It's just scary. Money is scary. You know that in the field that you're in. People are very nervous about what am I doing with my money, how is it being invested, etc. It's the same thing when they fill out these forms. They think, well, why do they need this?
Right. And all these boxes I've got to fill out. Which box goes where, which number goes which box. Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm always saying wherever I can is, somehow we need to reduce the fear factor on this, because it really isn't that complicated. The first time is the worst, the first child going to the first school, that first year. But once you get through it the first time, it just becomes rote. You know how to do it. And there are so many high schools, colleges, libraries, etc., that offer workshops. They'll bring in professionals from financial aid offices to lead people through the FAFSA the first time. Here's what you do, here's how you complete it. So I think those are probably the 2 biggest misconceptions, is I shouldn't save, and that it's too hard, I just shouldn't bother filling out the forms because it's far too complicated.
Sure, okay.
Absolutely save, and absolutely sit down and give yourself time. Okay,
so start early, complete the financial aid form, the client profile, the financial profile, and then just calm down and complete those forms, and then just get in touch with the financial aid office of the school of your choice if there's any changes.
Absolutely.
That's great. You've been such a delight. I really appreciate you being here. Your field of knowledge is just wonderful in financial aid. So Charles Pauls, who is goes by Chad Pauls, who is the Director of Financial Aid at the University of Rochester. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us today. If you have any suggestions or comments, please email me at nnocon@aol.com. Until next time, I'm Nanette Nocon.